Was Boruto weakened in his fight versus the Shinju? That is the most important question heading into Damon's fight versus Mamushi. Because if that is the case, this does call into question Mamushi's feats versus Boruto himself, being able to grab him before he could dodge his attack and even forcing Boruto to fly away using FTG. All of this does indicate that Mamushi scales to Boruto to some extent. But if that's the case, what does this mean for Damon? And if Boruto was weakened, to what extent and how? Well, based on what I've gathered, this all goes back to Rasengan Uzuhiko. You see, some believe that Mamushi isn't as strong as everyone makes him out to be. To some extent, he's a bit overrated. And that's because they believe that Boruto wasn't at full power when he first fought Mamushi. This stems from the fact that Boruto just before this interaction teleported across a dimension using FTG, which based on Boruto's fight versus Jura, drains him very quickly even in close quarter combat. So just imagine how much energy it took for Boruto to teleport to an unknown time space. And then you add the most important part, which is Rasengan Uzuhiko. Some believe that while this ability does amp Boruto's powers to some extent and gives him an edge in battle, it does also weaken him or even damages his body. That is because of the violent nature of the power itself. He's absorbing the rotational energy of the planet, and this is shown on panel to always be active, rotating around his body, to the extent that when he activates it, it destroys anything that's around him. I mean, the energy itself is so immense that his body can't even contain it, which is why we have those swirls around his body. And upon activation, it causes devastating levels of damage. So one can assume that this does cause some level of damage to Boruto's muscles or his nerves once he has that energy inside his body. And this isn't anything new to the Naruto and Boruto universe. We saw this with Naruto's Rasen Shuriken, which was a very powerful technique but also damaged Naruto's own hand, to the point that he was barred from using it until he learned how to throw it using Sage Mode. The same was said for Sasuke's Chidori initially in part 1. It actively damaged his nervous system and even ripped apart his skin at one point, but that was, at one point removed. But anyways, it did happen. And I'm sure everyone knows about the 8 inner gates. This one is actually more in line with the damage that could be caused by Uzuhiko, because the entire purpose of the gates is to restrict access to the user's chakra, because anything above that would damage their bodies. So it's somewhat like a limiter. And Boruto, just like anyone, has a limit to how much chakra he can contain at any given point, which is why I assume we have the chakra swirls going around his body. That's excess chakra that he isn't able to contain. So Boruto could sustain some level of damage that could make him weaker than he was in the fight versus Code, or his fight versus Jura, which would explain why he performed better in those instances. Now some will say, well, Jura was holding back his strength the entire time, so whatever Boruto did in that fight doesn't matter. And to some extent it's true, but this requires some level of nuance, because for one, there isn't a direct correlation to speed and strength. A character can be holding back their physical strength when punching someone and still be moving as fast as they could from point A to point B, or to react to that character's punches. And the same can be said vice versa. A character can be holding back their full speed and still use their full strength when punching someone. This also goes back to this notion that people have, whereas when a character receives an increase in their strength, they also receive an equivalent increase in speed, which simply isn't true. A prime example of this would be Tsunade and the Raikage. Tsunade is objectively stronger than the Raikage, but the Raikage is faster, which means there isn't a direct correlation between speed and strength. Like, some people would argue that Naruto, after receiving the other half of Kurama, was over 2 times as fast as Naruto at the end of Shippuden, which would make him multiple times the speed of light. Because of course, if Naruto with half of Kurama was reacting to light speed attacks, then Naruto with another half of Kurama should be able to react to something twice as fast, but that isn't how chakra or strength works in the Naruto universe. Never has been. The same way Naruto losing half of Kurama's chakra versus Momoshiki didn't make him half a Kurama weaker when it comes to his attack potency or his speed. It does have some impact, but it's not equivalent to the amount of chakra that was lost. I mean, most Naruto characters never utilize 100% of their chakra in any given attack. Just never happens. Which is why I'm not a fan of the 8 gates, because in essence, Naruto characters can never use their full potential unless they master the 8 gates, which most characters in Naruto haven't done. But this is kinda straying away from the point. The point is that Jura, while holding back his physical attack potency, doesn't really have to hold back his speed. And I think you can argue that he didn't, because he was trying to catch Boruto and simply couldn't do it when Boruto was at full power. To the point that he comments on the annoyance of FTG because Boruto kept teleporting away. And I know some will say, well, FTG's instantaneous movement, but Boruto has to make physical hand signs with his hands to activate the jutsu, and Jura wasn't able to stop him from doing that. And if one believes that Jura is faster than Mamushi, then Boruto can't also be slower than Mamushi or even relative to Mamushi in speed. So either the Shinjus are closer in speed to Jura than we initially thought, or Boruto was simply faster in his fight versus Jura. With that said, there is one big problem with this entire analysis, which is the fact that Boruto also used Uzuhiko versus Jura. So if the argument is that Boruto was weaker versus the Shinju because he used Uzuhiko, then he should also be weaker versus Jura. So what's the entire point of this video? Well, aside from the fact that Boruto was outmaneuvering Jura even before Uzuhiko and allowed himself to get caught so he could use Uzuhiko, you could argue that the damage done to Boruto's body from Uzuhiko used in his fight versus Jura was way less significant than what happened in the fight versus Code. And this is based on the duration to which Boruto had the jutsu active in both cases. So when it comes to the Code fight, Boruto had it activated before heading towards Code. And then he had this short interaction with Code when they had a chat, and then Code goes on to attack Boruto multiple times even though he missed them, which implies that time is passing while Boruto has this active, and then he finally goes on to land the jutsu. Whereas when he used it in the fight versus Jura, it happened very quickly. Like the very second Boruto activated Uzuhiko, he teleported behind Jura and then landed the jutsu. Which means that even if the theory is correct that Uzuhiko does damage the body, it would have done significantly less damage to Boruto's body in the Jura fight versus the Code fight, because he had it activated for longer in one of those fights. So as you can see, there's some logic to this analysis, but that doesn't mean it's true. I mean, I explained the opposite of this a few weeks ago in this video, that it could be the case that Boruto is simply stronger than he should be because of Uzuhiko. It could be similar to absorbing nature energy or even chakra from a tailed beast that does boost the physical properties of the person that absorbs it. That could then explain why Boruto is as strong as he appears to be in Two Blue Vortex, being able to blitz and destroy a beyond the Jigen level Code, and even contend with Jura to some extent, even though Jura wasn't using his full power. So there are two ways to look at the effects Uzuhiko could cause on Boruto's body, none of which is confirmed in the manga, but I think both are equally as plausible. With that being said, it could be the case that none of this is relevant to Mamushi and Damon. It could also be the case that these characters are more relative than we initially thought. So all the top tiers are pretty much relative when it comes to speed, and Jura just edges them out when it comes to physical attack potency. I do wonder how he's going to bypass Damon's reflection, because of course certain conditions for his ability to reflect intent hasn't been revealed as yet. And even though I have my own theories on Damon needing to see the person to reflect intent, that isn't confirmed in the actual manga, so we'll have to wait and see. I mean, there's this one panel which makes it seem as if Mamushi is using shadow clones of himself, because it shows multiple clones of his body, or that's what it seems like, which does somewhat play into the idea that Damon needs to see the person to reflect their intent. And if there are multiple clones of the person, he has to choose which one to focus on. So clones would actually be pretty useful against Damon in that specific instance, if the theory is true. But again, I guess we'll have to wait and see. With that said, again, that's it for the video. If you guys liked it, drop a like and comment your thoughts down below. Do you think that Boruto was weakened by Uzuhiko, or was he strengthened by it, or does it have no effect at all on Boruto's physical capabilities? And if you want to learn how Sarada might be able to defeat Damon, watch the video somewhere on screen. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.